that enhanced reproductive success in women were not identical to those that enhanced it in men. Rough sex linkage and sex limitation evolution has coupled genetically encoded adaptive strategies to the sex of the individual receiving them. What evolutionary psychology offers is the hope of integration in the understanding of human behavior. Using the most powerful theoretical development of the last 100 years, we are finally able to address the why question and to ask it together with other disciplines that have long ago accepted the premise of adaptation. Psychologists must work with and depend on other disciplines if the enterprise is to be successful. We need primatology to help us understand the common and unique paths of adaptation in the anthropoid line. We need paleoanthropology to track the evolving size and shape of the brain. We need archaeologists to describe the man-made tools and art that were part of the early emergence of Homo sapiens. We need anthropology to describe an 18. The essential woman, BIOPHOBIA, and the study of sex differences. Document the varieties of human solutions to ecological and social problems. We need geneticists to map the genome and tie complex psychological traits to their even more complex interacting genetic loci. We need biologists to identify the mutual paths between genes, hormones, and environment. We need developmentalists to document the trajectory and constraints on the successful emergence of human capabilities. We need neuroscientists to identify the evolution and modify cation of structures that govern specify human emotions and actions. We need pharmacologists to help us understand the actions of neurotransmitters and their relationship to subjective experience. As psychologists, our contribution is to identify the characteristics and parameters of the mental mechanisms that drive behavior. It will be a long and cooperative undertaking if it is to be finally successful. The meteoric rise of evolutionary psychology has been impressive, but it has not gone unchallenged. Its birth in the 1990s was greeted with disapproving howls as feminists attacked its politics and its scientific status, and sometimes both simultaneously. Bad politics. Sociobiology functions as a political theory and program. Blair, 1984, p. 46. Evolutionary psychology is not only a new science, it is a vision of morality and social order, a guide to moral behavior and policy agendas. Nelkin, 2000, p. 20. The biological accounts of male-female difference and male dominance that have emerged since the mid-19th century have merely used the language of science, rather than the language of religion, to rationalize and legitimize the status quo. Bem, 1993, p. 6. Nevertheless, the social construction of the categories, woman, and man, has been historically justified by reference to biological differences, and the modern tendency to provide essentialist and reductionist explanations which include the effects of genes and hormones can be viewed as a contemporary manifestation of this long-standing tradition. Muldoon and Riley, 1998, p. 63. Sociobiologists are constructing a framework of ideas about what is natural and what is not. Women who enter professions that are typical of men are therefore seen as unnatural and going against their biology, so too are men who take up professions using abilities considered typical of women. THSA, unnatural, women and men are considered to threaten the fabric of society, as seen and maintained by those scientists, politicians, business leaders and the general public who see genes as paramount in causing sex differences in behavior. Rogers, 1999, p. 49. Ought science to be seen as truth-telling, or as politics by other means, or can it be both things at the same time? Fausto Sterling, 1992, p. 58. As these quotes show, one line of attack has come from those who are more concerned with the political implications of evolutionary psychology than with its truth value. As they see it, any attempt to identify a universal human nature. Bad politics. 19. And to posit a biological basis is equivalent to abandoning all hope of social progress. For them, evolutionary psychology is about the maintenance of the status quo and the rejection of a liberal agenda. Some go further, viewing evolutionary psychology as a right-wing conspiracy, see Segerstrail, 2000. Despite the fact that evolutionary psychologists share the same left-of-center views as other branches of psychology and are considerably less conservative than average Americans. Tiber, Miller, and Gangestad, 2007. Many of the most vehement objections come from feminists who have been particularly offended by the proposal that universal sex differences may have a biological basis. But let's unpack their arguments and take them one at a time. Charge 1. Evolutionary theory is biological determinism. Evolutionary theory is certainly biological. It argues from the premise that the genes associated with phenotypic characteristics that increase survival and reproductive success will increase over generations. For feminists, the real issue is whether there are other biological differences between males and females aside from the somatic changes that are triggered by the 23rd chromosome pair. In short, are some psychological traits sex-linked carried on one of the sex-determining chromosomes, or sex-limited carried on autosomes and triggered by the presence of male or female hormones? Most feminists agree that there are two sexes possessing different reproductive organs and that the two sexes also differ on average in height, strength, and fat distribution. Lewontin, 1994. However, some writers do not even concede these facts. Muldoon and Riley, 1998, page 55, believe that the objectivity of hard science in this area can be questioned, so much so that the biological definition of sex itself becomes untenable. THEY suggests that there is no biological basis for our belief in male and female as dichotomous, mutually exclusive categories. See also Bem, 1993. Notwithstanding these authors' uncertainty, most feminists broadly agree that there are two discriminable sexes. Indeed, most feminists are even willing to acknowledge that biological differences are the result of evolution, provided that biology stops at the neck. Bem, 1993. Wood and Eagly, 2002. Even though the brain is the most expensive organ in the human body in terms of calorie consumption, and even though feminists accept that hominid brain size itself was a result of natural selection, feminists reject the notion that evolution could have had an impact on the minds of men and women. How successful reproduction is the reason for our existence today, and though the sexes play vital and different roles in that process, feminists reject any notion that their minds may have been sculpted by millions of years of evolution to pursue different strategies. Most 5-year-old children also agree that people are either male or female. THEY will also tell you that boys are rougher and GHT more than girls do. THEY. 20. The Essential Woman, BIOPHOBIA, and the Study of Sex Differences are correct. Sex difference in physical aggression is evident in naturalistic studies of playgrounds, in experimental studies of undergraduates, in psychometric inventories, and in criminal justice statistics. Eagly, 1987, Hyde, 1986, Crutchnet, 1994. Is sex differences cross-cultural and trans-historical? Daly and Wilson, 1988. There are no human societies in which women commit more violent crime than men. We also know that in animal species like our own, in which females provide the bulk of parental investment, the same sex difference exists. Geary, 2000. We have seen too that children show sex differences in aggression before the age at which they can correctly label the sex of others or sort photographs correctly by sex. Together these facts strongly suggest a very fundamental difference between the sexes in aggression, and one that, however biologically mediated, may be traced back ultimately to differential evolutionary pressures on the two sexes. It is important to bear in mind that evolutionary theory predicts sex differences in only a few psychological domains, those that are relevant to male and female roles in sexual reproduction. There would be no evolutionary reason to suppose that men and women should differ on average with regard to sociability, intelligence, sense of humor, or openness to experience, to name but a few, and they do not. There is every reason to think that they should differ in nurturance, hostility, and assertiveness, and they do. Feingold, 1994. Determinism issue, relates to the erroneous belief that genes alone direct development and behavior. Patently, this is not the case, although it is a straw man that is frequently used to bait evolutionists. Take 3 examples culled from many dozen similar pronouncements. Sociobiologists argue that these strategies are given by biology and thus imply that they are eternally phi-XED features of human sexual relations. Sayers, 1982, p. 60. By reducing human behavior and complex social phenomenon to genes and to inherited and programmed mechanisms of neuronal phi ring, the message of the new Wilsonian sociobiology becomes rapidly clear. We had better resign ourselves to the fact that the more unsavory aspects of human behavior, like wars, racism, and class struggle, are inevitable results of evolutionary adaptations based in our genes. Blyer, 1984, p. 15. Genes are therefore seen as the source of human behavior, including sex differences in monogamy and polygamy, aggression and the perception of beauty. Is clearly a reductionist position. Of course, genes have a part to play in the development of sex differences and other behaviors, but it need not be any more important than other influences from both inside and outside the body, and the part played by genes may not be separable from these other influences. Rogers, 1999, p. 44. Where are these evolutionary psychologists who allege that genes operate without reference to hormones, experience, or environment? Wherever they. Bad Politics. 21. I have not been able to locate them. Rather, it is environmentalists who set up mythical distinctions between nature and nurture in order to maintain a clear line between the politically correct and incorrect. As Margot Wilson and her co-workers 1997, page 433 explained. Biology is the study of the attributes of living things, and only living things can be social. So whence this idea of antithesis? Irony is that developmentally, experientially and circumstantially contingent variation is precisely what evolution-minded theories of social phenomenon are all about. Surely it is evident that the ultimate success of a given individual in evolutionary terms depends upon manifest behavior, which in turn derives from a particular gene-environment complex. Smuts 1995 provides a good example of this. Cooper and Zubek 1958 took strains of maize bright and maize dull rats that had been so successfully bred that there was no overlap in their maize performance. They then reared a new generation under normal, enriched, or impoverished conditions. All of the rats who were raised in the enriched environment performed as well as the maize bright rats that were reared normally. All the rats raised under impoverished conditions performed as poorly as maize dull rats reared normally. Behavior depends upon the confluence of genetic disposition and environmental influences. The environment interacts with genetic predispositions in a variety of ways. Buss, Heselton, Shackelford, Blesky, and Wakefield, 1998. Some environmental parameters are necessary for the emergence of adaptations. Absence of contact with a language-using community can severely disrupt the development of language, and early close contact with a reliable caretaker seems to be important for later social and emotional functioning. Early developmental events may channel individuals into different pathways by setting different expectations about the environment. Father-absent children are more inclined to pursue short-term mating patterns with the expectation that paternal investment is a statistically rare event. Families and communities characterized by high levels of competition and hostility set children on a more aggressive life course than those whose early interactions are more stable and cooperative. Other genetic tendencies are expressed only if the environment provides the necessary trigger. Nicotine addiction has a high genetic component, but whether it is activated depends upon environmental and sometimes chance factors such as exposure to peers who smoke. Environmental experiences can alter the expression of adaptations. Sexual jealousy seems to be activated only when people experience a deep and exclusive attachment to a romantic and sexual partner. The emergence of one strategy rather than another depends upon a variety of contemporaneous factors such as the life stage of the individual, the prevailing sex ratio, the number of alternative avenues of action, and her behavioral. 22. The Essential Woman, BIOPHOBIA, and the study of sex differences and psychological competencies. Humans are characterized by facultative responses to the demands of their environment. Differences between societies and between individuals are seen by evolutionary psychologists as environmentally induced variation in the expression of similar genotypes. In evolutionary theory, genetic predispositions orchestrate universal trends in human psychology and behavior and thus create what is often called human nature. It also directs particular male and female natures in some psychological modalities. However, superimposed upon these, we must take into account the impact of the environment in both development, nutrition, education, opportunities congenial to the development of particular abilities, and facultative adaptation, the particular environmental input that inform decisions about behavioral strategies. Charge 2. Evolutionary theory is simplistic and reductionist. Evolution is the process of selection which causes differential survival and reproduction of individuals as a function of their performance in a particular ecological niche. I can think of few other theories that can be expressed so succinctly. Yet pejorative accusations of simplistic, notwithstanding, it is apparently not simple enough to escape misunderstanding. Fausto Sterling, 1992, a biologist and vocal critic of evolutionary psychology, correctly explains the evolutionary premise that the sex which makes the lower parental investment, typically males, tends to display greater promiscuity in its mating habits. She then points to female promiscuity in phalaropes, sea snipes, exclaiming, "You name your animal species and make your political point." The non-political point which she completely misses is that in the phalarope it is the male not the female that makes the greater parental investment. Hence this example is entirely consistent with evolutionary theory and merely demonstrates what the theory has always argued: it is parental investment not sex per se that drives mating strategy. The truly remarkable thing about evolution is that, although the theory itself is simple, it leads to highly varied and often counterintuitive hypotheses. An evolutionary analysis of incest developed by Edvard Westermark argued that people develop an aversion to sexual contact with individuals with whom they spent their infancy and childhood years, normally siblings. One counterintuitive prediction was that children raised in kibbutzim should avoid marriage with their kindergarten peers despite their non-relatedness. Th's prediction turned out to be true. Schaeffer, 1983. A different strand of evolutionary thought has been concerned with homogamy, the tendency for like to mate with like. Together these two pieces of work can explain reports that siblings separated at birth and then reunited in adulthood tend to find one another sexually attractive. It seems to me to be simplicity at its best, a simple theory that is able to explain apparently unrelated and unexpected findings in the real. Bad politics. 23. World. There was a time when simplicity used to be called elegance and constituted one of the criteria for explanatory quality. If the data equally support two theories, then the simpler one is the better one. The charge of reductionism comes in two forms. The objects to the reduction of complex human behavior to the action of genes, and we have already discussed the fact that no serious evolutionary psychologist believes that genes can operate independently of the environment, although many feminists apparently fear that they may. The second highlights a failure to include the full range of variables that are needed to account for a given behavior. No scientist really wants this contrived simplicity, any more than her critics do. We would all love to offer complete theories that account for the full range and diversity of human behavior. But reductionism is a necessary evil. It is a stepping stone that allows us to work toward the truth by decomposing the explanation into its constituent elements. If, as many feminists prescribe, we reject reductionism and take on the full complexity of a phenomenon as it appears in the real world, we are faced with an insurmountable problem. Every event is determined by multiple causes and no event is ever exactly repeated. So without reductionism, the identify cation of causal factors and their interaction, we can offer only a description and nothing more. We cannot generalize beyond the historical moment and the actors involved. Feminists, like Gestalt psychologists, argue that the whole is more than the sum of the parts. So if as scientists we remove or introduce variables to observe their effect, we have committed reductionism by accepting the decomposability of what we study. Many feminists are happy to reject scientify method. But in making that choice, they become historians, not psychologists, describing but not explaining non-generalizable and unique events by the use of a subjective interpretation that is itself the product of a particular moment in history, geography, and culture. Charge 3. There are no human universals and hence no such thing as human nature. If something is universal, it may reflect a fundamental human nature and, if such a thing exists at a biological level, then attempts to ameliorate the status quo are doomed. This is the shaky reasoning that underpins the enormous kudos given to anthropologists who return from their travels with reports of novel and bizarre behavior in exotic locations. Obvious hoaxes such as Carlos Castaneda's dissertation on Don Juan or the discovery of the Taucidae, who were inventions of the Marcos government, were eagerly and, for many years, uncritically embraced by cultural anthropologists. Especially welcomed was Margaret Mead's 1935 challenge to the traditional equations of masculinity with aggression and femininity with gentleness. She conveniently found, within a 100-mile area, 3 tribes in which these equations broke down: the Arapesh, both sexes gentle; Mundugumar, both sexes aggressive; and the Chambulit, sex role. 24. The Essential Woman, BIOPHOBIA, and the study of sex differences. Reversed. Since that time, her claims have been discredited by other researchers, and these have been carefully documented by Freeman, 1983. Her determination to demonstrate the existence of these 3 anomalous permutations of sex and temperament led her to some strange interpretations of her observations. She argued that among the Mundugumar both sexes are violent; the men express it through murder, rape, and headhunting raids, while the women express it by serving tastier dishes than their co-wives. Among the allegedly gentle Arapesh, young men were not initiated into adulthood until they had committed homicide. Among the sex role reversed Chambuli, the makeup worn by men celebrates their killing of an enemy, and the aggressive women were frequently beaten by their gentle husbands.